That necklace doesn't belong to you. The string quartet's gentle melody died mid-note. Conversations evaporated into shocked silence. Even the bartenders froze, champagne bottles suspended in mid-pour. In the center of the Harrington Foundation's grand ballroom, beneath a chandelier worth more than most people's homes, Patricia Harrington stood like a statue carved from ice and fury, her finger pointed at a young woman in a black catering uniform. "Take that necklace off. Now." The words weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. Patricia Harrington had spent 40 years learning that real power whispered. Her voice carried the weight of boardrooms conquered, competitors crushed, and a fortune built from grief and determination. When she spoke, people listened. When she pointed, people looked. And everyone was looking now. The server stood motionless, her tray of half-empty champagne flutes trembling slightly in her hands. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with dark skin that seemed to glow under the golden light. Her uniform was impeccable, her posture perfect despite obvious exhaustion. But it was the necklace that held every eye in the room, a delicate platinum chain disappearing beneath her collar, showcasing a sapphire pendant surrounded by a halo of diamonds that caught the light and threw it back in defiant sparkles. "Ma'am, the girl began, her voice barely audible. "Don't." Patricia took a step forward, her cream and silver gown whispering against the marble floor. Her face had gone pale, making her carefully applied makeup look like a mask. "That necklace. Where did you get it?" The girl's hand moved instinctively to her throat, fingers closing protectively around the pendant. "It's mine." "Impossible." The word came out sharp enough to cut. Patricia's eyes, steel gray and merciless, swept over the girl with the kind of assessment that had made junior executives weep. "That piece is one of a kind. Custom-made. And it's been missing for 23 years. A murmur rippled through the crowd. 500 of the city's wealthiest and most powerful citizens, all dressed in their finest, all suddenly riveted by a drama that had nothing to do with the Foundation's mission statement or the silent auction. Phones emerged from evening bags. A camera flash went off somewhere in the back. The girl's jaw tightened, but she didn't move. Didn't explain. Didn't apologize. She just stood there, this exhausted server in a room full of people who'd never worked a day like hers, and met Patricia Harrington's glare with quiet, unshakable dignity. "Security." Patricia's voice cut through the whispers without even rising in volume. "Call security." Two men in dark suits began moving through the crowd, their earpieces glowing faintly. The girl's eyes tracked them, and for the first time, something flickered across her face. Not fear exactly. Something deeper. Something resigned. She'd been invisible 30 seconds ago, just another server refilling glasses and clearing plates, background music to other people's important lives. Now she was the only thing anyone could see. And Patricia Harrington, billionaire CEO and one of the most formidable women in the country, was looking at her like she'd reached into a grave and stolen from the dead. The girl's fingers remained wrapped around the pendant. Her mother's pendant. The only thing she had left. The security guards were 10 feet away now. 9. 8. And Patricia Harrington's eyes never blinked, never wavered, burning with something that looked like rage but sounded, when she spoke again, almost like grief. "That necklace," she said, her voice breaking on the last word, "belonged to my daughter. If you're ready to enjoy this story, I humbly request you like and click subscribe. Also let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as amazing and heartwarming as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now back to your story. 6 hours into her shift, Maryam's feet had gone numb. That was actually a blessing. Once the pain stopped, the work got easier. She'd learned that during her first catering job 3 years ago, back when she was still naive enough to think comfortable shoes mattered. They didn't. After hour 5, everything hurt anyway. She moved through the ballroom like a ghost, her tray perfectly balanced, her smile professionally pleasant but not too friendly. That was the trick to these events. Be present enough to be useful, invisible enough not to make anyone uncomfortable. Rich people didn't like being reminded that someone else was working while they played. Champagne, she offered to a woman dripping in emeralds. The woman took a glass without looking at her, without pausing her conversation about her villa in Tuscany. Maryam had already forgotten her face by the time she turned away. This was her second shift today. She'd worked a lunch event at a law firm downtown, raced across the city on 2 buses, changed into this uniform in a coffee shop bathroom, and arrived at the Harrington Foundation Gala with exactly 4 minutes to spare. Tomorrow she had an 8 a.m. statistics class, an essay due at noon, and another catering gig at 6 p.m. The day after that, more of the same. Her faculty advisor kept asking when she planned to cut back her hours, focus on her studies. As if she had a choice. As if anyone would pay her tuition because she asked nicely. As if her mother hadn't died leaving her with nothing but debt, memories, and one piece of jewelry she'd been forbidden to sell. Maryam's hand moved unconsciously to her throat, fingers brushing the familiar weight of the pendant. She shouldn't have worn it tonight. It violated the dress code. Servers weren't supposed to wear visible jewelry. But she'd been so tired this morning, so hollowed out by another nightmare about her father's death, that she'd needed the comfort. Needed to feel her mother close. The necklace was the only beautiful thing she owned. Her mother had worn it every day, even when they'd had nothing else. Even when they'd eaten rice and beans for weeks straight, even when the electricity got shut off, even during those final months in the hospital when everything else had been stripped away. Her mother's fingers had clutched it on her deathbed, and her last words had been a whisper, "Never sell it, baby. No matter what. Promise me." Maryam had promised. And she'd kept that promise through evictions and hunger and nights when she'd calculated exactly how much the sapphire might be worth, how many months of rent it could buy, how much easier everything would become. She circled the room again, offering champagne to people who earned more in a day than she would in a year. A man in a tuxedo took 2 glasses without saying thank you. A woman in a diamond tiara waved her away impatiently. Invisible. That's what she was here. That's what she'd learned to be. Until Patricia Harrington looked directly at her, and Maryam realized that sometimes, being seen was infinitely worse than being invisible. The CEO's eyes locked onto the necklace, and Maryam watched something terrible happen to the woman's face. Recognition, shock, and then a fury so pure it seemed to freeze the air itself. And then came the words that would shatter everything. "Take that necklace off. Now." Patricia Harrington had learned to live with ghosts. She'd had no choice. For 23 years, she'd seen her daughter's face in every crowd, heard her laugh in every young woman's voice, felt her absence in every empty chair at every holiday dinner. Some people said time healed all wounds. Those people were liars. Time didn't heal. It calcified. It turned grief into something harder, colder, more useful. Patricia had taken her shattered heart and built an empire with the shards. When her daughter first disappeared, Patricia had been someone else entirely, a society wife who organized charity luncheons and wore pearls to breakfast, content to let her husband run the family business while she managed their perfect life. But their daughter had taken that life with her when she vanished, and 3 years later, her husband's heart attack had taken what remained. He died still searching, still believing their daughter would walk through the door with an apology and an explanation. Patricia had buried him knowing better. Their daughter wasn't coming home. She'd made her choice. She'd chosen some nobody over her own family, thrown away everything they'd given her, and disappeared into whatever sordid life she'd built with him. Patricia had found the goodbye note months later, hidden in a book. "I'm sorry. I love him. Please understand." She'd understood perfectly. Her daughter had been a fool. So Patricia had stopped being a fool herself. She'd stepped into her late husband's office, learned the business in 6 months, and transformed a comfortable fortune into a dynasty. She bought out competitors, expanded into new markets, and built the Harrington Foundation into one of the most influential charitable organizations in the country. She gave away millions every year to causes her daughter might have cared about, back when she'd still been the bright-eyed girl who'd wanted to change the world. The necklace had been Patricia's last gift to that girl, a 21st birthday present, custom designed, one of a kind. She'd had words engraved inside the clasp, hidden where only her daughter would know to look. A mother's love compressed into microscopic letters. 2 weeks later, her daughter was gone. Patricia had hired investigators, of course. The best money could buy. They'd found nothing. No trail, no records, no trace. Her daughter had erased herself as thoroughly as if she'd never existed. And eventually, Patricia had accepted the most likely truth: her daughter was dead. Had been for years. Some tragedy with whatever lowlife she'd run off with, her body probably in an unmarked grave somewhere, her name forgotten. The necklace was gone too. Patricia had assumed it had been sold immediately, the first thing to go when her daughter realized love didn't pay rent. But now, impossible as it seemed, there it was. The same platinum chain. The same sapphire, flawless and vivid. The same halo of diamonds catching light like captured stars. Around the neck of a stranger. A server. A girl young enough to be. No. Patricia's mind recoiled from the thought. Coincidence. It had to be. A good fake, maybe. Or the girl had bought it somewhere, some pawn shop that had somehow acquired it years ago. But even as Patricia told herself these lies, her hands were shaking. Because she knew that necklace. Knew every facet, every curve. And the way this girl was touching it, protective, possessive, like it meant something beyond its value, made Patricia's carefully constructed walls begin to crack. That necklace belonged to my daughter, she heard herself say, her voice breaking on the last word despite 40 years of boardroom control. And for the first time in 23 years, Patricia Harrington felt something besides cold, hard certainty. She felt afraid. The security guards flanked Maryam like parentheses around a mistake. The one on her left was tall enough to block out the chandelier. The one on her right kept his hand near his belt, ready for trouble. The entire ballroom held its breath. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." The taller guard's voice was professionally neutral, but his eyes said what his mouth didn't. "You don't belong here." Maryam set down her tray on a nearby table with deliberate care. Her hands weren't shaking, she wouldn't let them. "I haven't done anything wrong." The necklace. Patricia's voice cut through the space between them. She'd moved closer now, close enough that Maryam could see the fine lines around her eyes, the barely controlled tremor in her jaw. "Remove it. Immediately." "No." The word came out stronger than Maryam felt. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Servers didn't say no to Patricia Harrington. Nobody said no to Patricia Harrington. This is theft. Patricia's words were ice over steel. That piece is worth over $200,000. It was stolen from my family 23 years ago, and I want to know how you got it. Murmurs erupted around them. Maryam could feel the eyes, the judgment, the assumptions clicking into place in hundreds of minds simultaneously. Young black server. Priceless jewelry. Billionaire white woman. The story wrote itself, didn't it? "I didn't steal anything," Maryam said quietly. "Then explain." Patricia's face was a mask of barely restrained fury, but something else flickered beneath it. Something Maryam couldn't quite name. "Explain how a catering server is wearing a custom piece that disappeared with my daughter over 2 decades ago. Explain how you have something that's been lost since before you were even born." The crowd pressed closer, a living wall of silk and judgment. Maryam saw phones raised, recording. Saw faces twisted with curiosity, sympathy for the wronged billionaire, suspicion of the help who dared to wear something so far above her station. A woman in a red gown whispered loudly enough to be heard, "It's obviously stolen. Look at her." "Should call the police," someone else muttered. But there were other voices too, quieter, uncomfortable. A young man near the back, "This doesn't feel right." An older woman in pearls, frowning, "Maybe we should let her explain." The taller security guard reached for Maryam's arm. She stepped back instinctively, her hand flying to the necklace again. "Don't touch me." "Ma'am, don't make this difficult." "I said don't touch me." Her voice rose for the first time, carrying across the ballroom with an edge that made the guard pause. "This necklace is mine. It's the only thing I have left of my mother, and I'm not taking it off because some rich woman thinks I don't deserve to own something beautiful." The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia's face had gone white. "Your mother," she repeated, and the words sounded strange in her mouth, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. "What does your mother have to do with my daughter's necklace?" Maryam's chest was heaving now, adrenaline finally breaking through her exhaustion. She was so tired. Tired of working 3 jobs, tired of being invisible, tired of being assumed guilty just for existing in spaces where people like her weren't supposed to be. "Everything," she said, and her voice cracked. "It has everything to do with her." Patricia took a step back as if she'd been struck. Her hand rose to her throat, mirroring Maryam's protective gesture. For a long moment, the two women just stared at each other across an impossible divide: wealth and poverty, age and youth, loss and grief speaking a language neither fully understood yet. "Security," Patricia said finally, but her voice had lost its edge. "Don't touch her. Just wait." The room seemed to exhale. But nobody moved. Nobody left. Because everyone could feel it now, the terrible gravity of something larger than theft, larger than accusation. Something that felt like fate, cruel and inevitable, pulling two strangers together in the wreckage of what they'd both lost. Maryam's throat was tight, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed in front of 500 strangers. She'd cried enough in her life, cried when her father died, cried through her mother's illness, cried alone in cheap apartments where the walls were too thin and the future too uncertain. She wouldn't cry here. Not for these people. But her voice, when it came, was raw with everything she'd been holding back. "My mother died 4 years ago." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. "Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. She worked 3 jobs her whole life and never had health insurance good enough to catch it early." Patricia's face remained frozen, but something shifted in her eyes. "She didn't leave me much. Couldn't. There was nothing to leave except debt and hospital bills." Maryam's fingers traced the pendant's edge, a gesture so practiced it was unconscious. "But she left me this. Made me promise never to sell it, no matter how bad things got. And things got bad." The ballroom was so quiet Maryam could hear the rustle of expensive fabric as people leaned closer. "I was 19 when she died. Alone. Terrified. There were nights I calculated exactly what this necklace might be worth. Researched pawn shops. Held it in my hand and told myself my mother would understand, that survival mattered more than promises." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "But I couldn't do it. Because when she gave it to me, when she put it around my neck with hands so thin I could see every bone, she said it was the only thing her mother ever gave her. The only proof that someone had loved her once, before everything fell apart." A woman in the crowd gasped softly. Patricia swayed slightly, and for a moment Maryam thought the CEO might collapse. "She told me it was more valuable than I could understand. Not because of the stones or the metal, but because it was a promise. Her mother's promise that love could survive anything." Maryam's laugh was bitter. "Guess she was wrong about that. Her mother never came looking for her. Never found her. My mom died believing she'd been thrown away like trash." "No." The word burst from Patricia like a wound opening. "No, that's not. We looked. We looked everywhere." "Did you?" Maryam met her gaze directly. "Did you look for a woman who changed her name? Who married a man you didn't approve of? Who built a life so different from yours that you wouldn't recognize it if you saw it?" Patricia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "She worked as a waitress," Maryam continued, her voice gaining strength from somewhere deep. "Cleaned houses. Raised me in apartments where the heat didn't always work. She was brilliant. I found her old report cards after she died. Straight A's, scholarship offers from universities I can't even afford to apply to now. But she gave it all up. For love. For my father. For the life she chose. Your father. Patricia's voice was barely audible. Who was he? The best man I never got to know. Maryam's hand tightened around the pendant, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt something besides fear. She felt pride. He was a mechanic. Worked with his hands. Fixed things. My mother said he could fix anything except the world's ugliness. Her voice cracked. Couldn't fix the bullet that killed him either. The room erupted in whispers. Patricia stumbled backward, and the shorter security guard actually reached out to steady her. He died protecting me, Maryam said, and now the tears did come, hot and unstoppable. I was 6. He took me to the summer fair. Bought me ice cream. We were laughing, and then there were gunshots, and he threw himself over me. They thought he was someone else. Gang violence. Mistaken identity. He bled out on the pavement while I screamed. She was crying openly now, but she didn't care anymore. Let them see. Let them all see what their world of wealth and comfort looked like from the outside. My mother never recovered. She tried, God, she tried so hard. But she'd lost everything. Her family. Her old life. And then the man she'd sacrificed it all for. We survived, but barely. And she wore this necklace every single day like a lifeline to a past that had rejected her. Patricia's face had crumbled. Tears streamed down her perfectly made-up cheeks, cutting tracks through foundation that probably cost more than Maryam's monthly rent. What was your mother's name? Patricia whispered. Please. What was her name? Maryam hesitated. This was it, the moment that would either prove her a liar or shatter whatever remained of Patricia Harrington's carefully constructed world. She changed it, Maryam said slowly. She wanted to start fresh. Become someone new. Someone her family couldn't find or drag back. She took a shaking breath. But her real name, her birth name, was on her death certificate. I keep it in a lockbox with her ashes. Tell me. Patricia was begging now, this powerful woman reduced to desperate pleading in front of hundreds of witnesses. Please, tell me her name. And Maryam realized, with a jolt that felt like lightning through her chest, that she was about to destroy this woman. That the truth was a weapon, and she was holding the trigger. The question was, did Patricia Harrington deserve to be destroyed? Her name, Maryam said, watching Patricia's face with something between pity and vindication, was originally Elizabeth. Elizabeth Harrington. Patricia's knees buckled. The shorter security guard caught her, eased her into a chair someone had frantically pulled forward. The CEO's breath came in ragged gasps, her hand pressed against her chest as if she could physically hold her heart together. Elizabeth, she whispered. My Lizzie. My brightest star. The ballroom erupted in chaos, voices overlapping, phones recording, the story already being texted, tweeted, uploaded to a world that would devour it hungrily. But Maryam barely heard it. She was watching this woman fall apart, and feeling her own carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. You're lying. Patricia's head snapped up, her eyes wild with desperate hope and terrible fear. This is some elaborate con. You researched my family, found out about Elizabeth, bought a fake necklace. I don't even know who you are, Maryam interrupted quietly. I mean, I know now. Patricia Harrington, billionaire CEO, philanthropist. But 2 hours ago? You were just another rich person at another gala I was serving. I didn't know your name. Didn't know you existed. Then how? My mother never talked about her past. Never. Maryam's voice was steady now, the truth a solid thing she could stand on. I asked when I was little, but she'd just get this look on her face. Like I'd stabbed her. So I stopped asking. I knew she'd had parents once, a family somewhere, but she said they were dead to her. I thought she meant it figuratively. Patricia flinched as if she'd been slapped. After she died, I found things. Letters she'd written but never sent. A journal from before I was born. Maryam's throat tightened. She wrote about leaving home. About falling in love with a man her parents called unsuitable. About the fights, the ultimatums. They told her if she married him, she was choosing to throw her life away. That he would drag her down. That she'd regret it. We were protecting her, Patricia said, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. You were protecting yourselves. Maryam's voice was gentle but unforgiving. From embarrassment. From having a daughter who didn't marry the right kind of man. My father wasn't white, wasn't wealthy, wasn't from your world. So he wasn't good enough. A man in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. A woman near the bar set down her champagne glass with a sharp click. She wrote that you gave her a choice, Maryam continued. Him or the family. Love or money. She chose love. Patricia's tears were falling freely now, mascara streaking her face. She was 21. Too young to understand what she was giving up. I thought, she'd come back. After a few months, after reality set in. I thought she'd realize her mistake and come home. She did realize something. Maryam's voice was soft but cut like a blade. She realized you'd never loved her enough to let her be happy. Only enough to want to control her. The ballroom was silent except for Patricia's ragged breathing. But she was happy, Maryam said, and now her voice broke with the weight of memory. I remember that much, even though I was so young. She and my father, they laughed all the time. He'd come home covered in grease from the garage, and she'd kiss him anyway. They danced in our tiny kitchen. They were poor, struggling, but they were happy. Until he died, Patricia whispered. Until he died, Maryam confirmed. And then she was alone with a 6-year-old daughter, no education she could use without explaining who she'd been, no family to turn to because they'd made it clear she was dead to them. She survived anyway. Raised me. Worked herself to exhaustion so I could have a chance at the life she'd given up. Patricia's head was in her hands now. Her shoulders shook with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ancient, a grief that had been waiting 23 years to be released. She loved you, Maryam said, and the word surprised even her. Even after everything. She kept the necklace. Wore it every day. That had to mean something. It meant everything, Patricia said through her tears. It was the last thing I gave her before I lost her. You didn't lose her. Maryam's voice turned hard. You threw her away. There's a difference. And in the terrible silence that followed, no one in that glittering ballroom could argue with the truth. Patricia looked up at Maryam with devastated eyes. Tell me about him. Your father. I need to know who she loved enough to leave everything behind. Maryam closed her eyes, pulling up memories worn soft from years of repetition. His name was Felix. Felix Bassi. He was 25 when they met. My mother was working at a diner near his garage, saving money for college. She said he came in every day for coffee and pie, and they'd talk for hours when the place was slow. He made her laugh. Made her feel seen. A sad smile crossed Maryam's face. She said he was the first person who asked what she wanted, not what she was supposed to want. Who cared about her dreams, not her family name or her trust fund or whatever future her parents had planned. We had plans for her, Patricia whispered. Good plans. Graduate school. A position in the company. A suitable marriage. To someone you chose, Maryam interrupted. Not someone she loved. Patricia's silence was answer enough. My father proposed with a ring he'd saved 6 months to buy. It was tiny, she showed me once, before she had to sell it to pay rent. But she said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever owned because it was chosen freely, given freely, accepted freely. No strings. No conditions. Just love. Maryam's voice grew softer. They got married at a courthouse. No family, no big wedding. She changed her name that day, became someone new. She wrote in her journal that it felt like being born again. Scary and painful and necessary. "And then you were born," Patricia said quietly. 3 years later. They named me Maryam. It means beloved in Arabic. My father wanted me to always know I was wanted. The tears were back, hot and insistent. He died for me. Literally threw his body between me and bullets meant for someone else. "Tell me," Patricia said, her voice breaking. "Please. I need to understand what my daughter went through." Maryam took a shaky breath. It was August. Hot enough that the pavement burned through my shoes. My father had just gotten paid, and he wanted to do something special. The county fair was in town. Rides and games and fried food and all the things that seemed magical when you're 6 years old. She could see it still, vivid as yesterday. He bought me a pink balloon. We shared a funnel cake. He won me a stuffed bear throwing darts at balloons. Took him 3 tries and he was so proud when he got it. We were in line for the merry-go-round when I said I wanted ice cream. Patricia leaned forward, transfixed. There was a vendor nearby. My father said we'd get ice cream first, then rides. He was holding my hand, making me laugh with silly voices about which flavor the bear would want. And then I heard shouting. Men's voices, angry. My father looked up, and his whole body went stiff. Maryam's voice dropped to almost nothing. He picked me up. Started walking fast in the other direction. But we weren't fast enough. Someone shouted a name, not his name, but someone else's. And then gunshots. Pop, 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 like firecrackers. The ballroom was absolutely silent, hundreds of people frozen in horror. He threw me down, covered me with his body. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't see. Just heard more shots, screaming, running. And then he got heavy. Really heavy. I tried to push him off, but he wouldn't move. A woman in the crowd was crying openly now, her hand over her mouth. When the police pulled him away, his shirt was red. So much red. His eyes were open but wrong, looking at nothing. I screamed for him. Kept screaming. Someone found my mother's number in his wallet, called her. She showed up still wearing her waitress uniform, and when she saw him she just broke. Completely broke. Patricia was sobbing, her carefully maintained composure shattered. My daughter watched all this. From the hospital waiting room, yeah. They wouldn't let her see him, but she knew. We both knew. Maryam wiped her eyes roughly. The police said it was gang-related. My father looked like someone else. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong face. The shooters were caught a week later. Got life sentences. Didn't bring him back. And Elizabeth, your mother, she was alone. With a traumatized 6-year-old and no support system. No family to help because her family had cut her off. No money because my father's life insurance was barely enough to bury him. Maryam's voice turned bitter. She applied for jobs using her new name, but she had no recent work history she could explain, no references. We lived in shelters for a while. Then crappy apartments in dangerous neighborhoods because that's all she could afford. She could have come home, Patricia whispered. Could have called us. Could she? Maryam's eyes blazed. After you told her she was dead to you? After you made her choose between you and the man she loved? After years of silence? She had pride. Maybe it was all she had left, but it was hers. Patricia's face crumpled. I would have helped. If I'd known. You didn't want to know. That's the point. Maryam's voice was harsh with decades of inherited pain. You wanted her back on your terms. Repentant. Admitting you were right. But she wasn't wrong. She loved my father. She chose a good man, a kind man. And the world killed him anyway. The truth of it hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Patricia Harrington had lost her daughter to pride, her own and her daughter's. And now she was face to face with a granddaughter she'd never known existed, learning that her daughter had died in poverty and pain, estranged and alone. How did she die? Patricia finally asked. Slowly, Maryam said. And without health insurance. By the time they caught the cancer, it was everywhere. She had months, maybe. Spent them working until she literally couldn't stand anymore, trying to save enough money to leave me something. Anything. Maryam touched the necklace. This was it. This was all she could give me. And the promise that someone had loved her once, even if they'd loved her wrong. Patricia's hands reached out, trembling, toward the pendant. May I? She whispered. And Maryam, after everything, after all the pain and loss and struggle, nodded. Patricia stood on shaking legs, and the crowd parted like water as she approached Maryam. Up close, the CEO looked older, the harsh ballroom lights catching every line grief had carved into her face. Her hands, when she reached for the necklace, trembled so badly she had to try twice before she could lift it gently from Maryam's chest. I had this made for her 21st birthday, Patricia whispered, her fingers tracing the sapphire's facets. She always loved blue. As a little girl, she'd make me paint her room blue, dress her in blue, buy her blue birthday cakes. She said it was the color of freedom, like the sky. Maryam's throat tightened. She'd never known that. Had never known her mother as a little girl with favorite colors and birthday cakes. I spent months designing this. Worked with a jeweler in Switzerland to get it exactly right. The sapphire is from Sri Lanka, ethically sourced, because Elizabeth would have cared about that. The diamonds are conflict-free. Everything had to be perfect for her. Patricia's tears fell onto the pendant, making the stones shimmer. I gave it to her at a party, hundreds of people, just like tonight. She hugged me. Told me it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Wore it every day for 2 weeks. And then she left, Maryam said softly. And then she left. Patricia's voice broke. Took the necklace and disappeared. I used to imagine finding it in a pawn shop somewhere, proof that she'd sold it the moment she needed cash. It would have hurt, but at least I'd have known she'd survived long enough to need money. She never would have sold it, Maryam said. It was her last piece of you. The only proof that you'd loved her before everything went wrong. Patricia's hands stilled. I never stopped loving her. I was angry, disappointed, terrified for her future. But I never stopped loving her. Did you look for her? The question came out harder than Maryam intended. Every day. Patricia's voice was fierce with old pain. I hired investigators. The best money could buy. They searched for months, checked every Elizabeth Harrington in the country, every marriage record, every death certificate. Found nothing. Because she wasn't Elizabeth Harrington anymore, Maryam said. She'd changed her name. Became someone else entirely. What name did she use? Patricia's eyes were desperate. Please. I need to know what to put on her headstone. She deserves to come home, to be buried with her father. Maryam hesitated. This felt like the final piece, the last secret her mother had kept. Once she said it, there would be no going back. Patricia Harrington would have proof, would have the truth, would have everything she needed to rewrite history however she wanted. But maybe her mother deserved to be remembered. To have her real name spoken in this room full of people who'd never known she existed. She called herself Harriet, Maryam said quietly. Harriet Bassi, after she married my father. Close enough to her birth name that it felt familiar, different enough that no one would connect them. Patricia's breath caught. Harriet. She became Harriet. She said it meant home ruler. That she wanted to rule her own home, her own life. Make her own choices. Maryam's voice was gentle now, seeing the devastation on Patricia's face. She was happy with that choice. Despite everything. Despite losing you, despite poverty, despite my father's death. She told me once, near the end, that she'd do it all again. That my father was worth it. That I was worth it. But she's gone, Patricia whispered. And I never got to tell her I was sorry. Never got to meet you. Never got to know my granddaughter. The word hung between them, granddaughter. Real and impossible and terrifying. I need proof, Patricia said suddenly, her voice regaining some of its edge. Not because I don't believe you. God help me, I do. But because I need to be sure. Need to see her death certificate, her marriage license. Need to know it's really her. Maryam nodded. It's in a lockbox at my apartment. Along with photos, her journal, everything I couldn't bear to throw away. You can see it all. But first, Patricia said, her hand still cradling the pendant, I need to check something. She turned the necklace over, her fingers searching the clasp with the familiarity of someone who'd done this 1,000 times in her mind. There, a tiny seam, barely visible. She pressed it, and the clasp opened to reveal a hidden compartment. What are you? Maryam started. I had the jeweler engrave a message, Patricia interrupted, her voice shaking. Inside the clasp. Secret. Just between us. Elizabeth knew it was there, but I never told anyone else. Not my husband, not the investigators. It was our secret. She held the clasp up to the light, squinting at microscopic letters etched into platinum. And then she read, her voice breaking on every word. My brightest star. Always. Mom. Maryam gasped. She'd owned this necklace for 4 years and never known those words were there. Never known her mother had carried them against her skin every single day. Patricia's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees in the middle of the ballroom, still clutching the necklace, her body racked with sobs that seemed to tear themselves from somewhere deep and wounded and lost. She's gone, Patricia wailed, and it wasn't the voice of a billionaire CEO anymore. It was the voice of a mother who'd lost her child. My baby is gone, and I never got to tell her I was sorry. Never got to hold her again. Never got to meet her family or know her life or tell her that I was wrong. So wrong about everything. And Maryam, who'd hated this woman 5 minutes ago, who'd blamed her for everything her mother had suffered, found herself kneeling too. Found herself reaching out. Found herself holding this stranger who was also family, both of them crying in front of 500 people who would turn this into a story, a viral moment, a piece of gossip. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Because Patricia had just found her daughter. And Maryam had just found her grandmother. The penthouse suite of the Harrington estate sat 40 floors above the city, all glass and steel and panoramic views that reduced the world below to glittering insignificance. Maryam stood at the window, still wearing her catering uniform, watching sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. She hadn't slept. Neither had Patricia. Behind her, the living room looked like a museum of a life she'd never known. Patricia had pulled out boxes from storage, decades of photographs, report cards, childhood drawings, all the debris of a daughter who'd vanished. They were spread across expensive furniture now, a paper trail of love and loss. This was her 6th birthday, Patricia said, her voice hoarse from crying. She held up a photo of a little girl in a blue dress, gap-toothed and grinning. She wanted a dinosaur cake. Not princess, not flowers. Dinosaurs. The caterer thought I was insane. Maryam took the photo with shaking hands. The little girl looked nothing like her mother had looked at the end, gaunt and exhausted and gray. This child was vibrant, alive, full of the kind of joy that came from being safe and loved and certain the world was good. She looked happy, Maryam said softly. She was. We both were before. Patricia's voice trailed off. Before I ruined it. They'd spent hours piecing together the timeline. Patricia had shown Maryam her daughter's childhood room, preserved exactly as Elizabeth had left it, like a shrine to hope. The walls were still blue. A Stanford acceptance letter still sat on the desk, never acted upon. A diary from age 16 detailed crushes and dreams and a girl who'd wanted to change the world. And then there was the gap. The missing years. The life Maryam's mother had lived in poverty while this room sat empty, waiting for a daughter who would never come home. "I brought something," Maryam said. She'd gone home at 3 a.m., Patricia's driver waiting in the car like this was normal, like this whole impossible night was something that happened to regular people. She'd retrieved the lockbox from under her bed, the only thing of value she owned besides the necklace. Now she opened it on Patricia's glass coffee table. Inside, a death certificate for Harriet Bassey, age 43, cause of death, pancreatic cancer. A marriage license showing Harriet Thompson marrying Felix Bassey 7 months after Elizabeth Harrington had disappeared. A worn journal with Elizabeth's handwriting on the first page. "This is the story of who I really am." Patricia's hands hovered over the documents like they might burn her. Thompson. Where did that name come from? Her mother's maiden name, Maryam said. She told me once that she wanted to carry something from her old life, even if no one else knew. Patricia picked up the marriage license with trembling hands. The photo showed a young woman in a simple white dress, beaming at a handsome black man in a suit that looked new. They were holding hands, their joy almost painful to witness. "She looks so happy," Patricia whispered. She was. Right up until the moment your investigators probably asked if anyone had seen an Elizabeth Harrington, and everyone said no because that wasn't her name anymore. The accusation hung in the air. Patricia flinched but didn't deny it. "I have more," Maryam said. She pulled out photos, her father holding newborn Maryam in a hospital room that was clean but clearly underfunded. Her mother pushing Maryam on a rusty swing set, both of them laughing despite the cracked pavement and graffitied walls behind them. Her parents dancing in a kitchen so small there was barely room to turn around. And then the after photos. Her mother alone, older, thinner, holding a gap-toothed Maryam who looked confused about why Daddy wasn't in the picture anymore. Patricia examined each one like scripture. She aged so fast. "Poverty does that," Maryam said without malice. "Working 3 jobs, raising a traumatized kid alone, never sleeping enough or eating enough or getting the health care you need. It burns you up from the inside. I could have helped." Patricia's voice was anguished. If she'd just called. She did call. Maryam pulled out a phone bill from 15 years ago, a single number highlighted. 3 months after my father died. She called your home number from a payphone. Hung up before anyone answered. I found the bill after she died, saw she'd circled it in pen. Like she was documenting her courage, even if she couldn't follow through. Patricia covered her mouth, fresh tears streaming. "I never knew. If I'd known." "Would you have answered? Would you have helped without conditions? Without making her apologize for choosing love?" The silence was answer enough. Maryam pulled out the journal, opened it to a page marked with a faded ribbon. She wrote this the night before she died. The hospice nurse said she stayed up for hours, even though she could barely hold the pen. She read aloud, her voice breaking, "I've made so many mistakes, but loving Felix wasn't one of them. Leaving my family was the hardest thing I ever did, but it was also the bravest. I chose myself. I chose love. I chose a real life over a perfect one. And I'd do it again. I'd do it all again for one more day with him, one more hour with my daughter. The only thing I regret is that Maryam grew up thinking she came from nowhere. She came from somewhere. She has a grandmother who loved me once, maybe still does. I hope someday they find each other. I hope my mother tells her who I was before I became brave enough to leave." Patricia was sobbing again, her perfect makeup completely destroyed, her designer gown creased and ruined. She looked nothing like the woman who'd stood in the ballroom hours ago, all ice and accusation. She looked like what she was, a mother who'd lost everything and just realized it. "She forgave you," Maryam said softly. Even after everything. She wanted us to meet. I don't deserve forgiveness. Maybe not. But she gave it anyway. Maryam touched the necklace at her throat. This wasn't just jewelry to her. It was proof that love could survive. That somewhere, someone had loved her enough to choose something perfect just for her. Patricia reached out, her fingers brushing the pendant. I choose you, she whispered. Right now. I choose you, Maryam. My granddaughter. If you'll let me. Maryam looked at this woman, this stranger who was family, this billionaire who'd lost everything that mattered, this grandmother who'd spent 23 years searching for a daughter who'd been surviving in plain sight. I don't need your money, Maryam said. I don't want your guilt or your charity or some pretty woman makeover of my life. Then what do you want? Maryam thought about her mother, dying alone because she'd been too proud to ask for help. Thought about her father, killed by a violence he had nothing to do with. Thought about all the kids like her, orphaned by poverty and tragedy, struggling alone, invisible to people who could help but chose not to see. I want to make sure what happened to my mother doesn't happen to anyone else, she said. I want kids who lose parents to have somewhere to turn. I want teenagers working 3 jobs to afford college to have another option. I want my father's death to mean something. Patricia's eyes sharpened with something like recognition. A foundation. In their names. Both of them. Elizabeth Harrington and Felix Bassi. The daughter who chose love and the man who died protecting it. And you'll help me run it? Maryam met her grandmother's eyes. Only if you tell their real story. Not some sanitized version where my father was acceptable and my mother made reasonable choices. The truth. That she left her family for love, that they struggled and survived, that he died senselessly and she died alone and none of it should have happened that way. Patricia nodded slowly. The truth. All of it. Even the parts that make me look like a mother who loved her daughter but loved control more? Yeah. Those parts too. For a long moment they just looked at each other, 2 women separated by everything except blood and grief. Then Patricia opened her arms. And Maryam, who'd been alone for so long, who'd convinced herself she didn't need family, stepped into them. They held each other as the sun rose over a city that didn't care about their pain, their loss, their unlikely reunion. But they cared. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. 6 months later, the Elizabeth Harrington and Felix Bassi Foundation held its first scholarship ceremony in a community center 3 blocks from where Felix had died. Patricia had wanted to host it at a hotel, somewhere nice, she'd said. Maryam had insisted on here, where the people who needed help could actually get to it. The room was packed. Not with billionaires in designer gowns, but with single mothers and struggling students, with kids aging out of foster care and teenagers working full-time while trying to graduate. Real people with real problems that money could actually solve. Maryam stood at the podium in jeans and a blazer, a compromise between her style and her grandmother's suggestions. The necklace gleamed at her throat. She wore it every day now, just like her mother had. A promise that love could survive anything. My mother died believing she'd been erased, Maryam began, her voice steady. That her family had forgotten her, that her life didn't matter because she'd chosen love over money. My father died protecting me from a violence he had nothing to do with. For a long time, I thought their stories ended there. In loss and tragedy and waste. She looked at Patricia, sitting in the front row next to a framed photo of Elizabeth as a young woman and Felix in his mechanic's uniform. Her grandmother's eyes were red. They were always red these days. But she was smiling. But stories don't end when people die. They end when we stop telling them. Maryam's voice grew stronger. So this foundation is how we tell their story. Every scholarship is my mother choosing love. Every mentorship program is my father protecting someone. Every kid who gets help is proof that their lives mattered. The room erupted in applause. Maryam saw tears, hope, recognition. These people understood loss, understood struggle, understood that sometimes the system was designed to let you fall through the cracks. We're awarding 50 scholarships today, Maryam continued. Full rides to college for students who've lost parents to violence, illness, or incarceration. Students who work multiple jobs. Students who've been told they don't belong in places of higher education. Students like I was 6 months ago. More applause. A woman in the back was crying openly. But this isn't charity, Maryam said firmly. This is investment. You are brilliant and capable and deserving. You've survived things that would break most people. Your stories matter. Your futures matter. And we're here to make sure you get the chance to write them. She called names, 50 students, each with their own story of loss and survival. A girl whose father had been deported. A boy whose mother died of an overdose. Twins orphaned in a car accident. Each one walked up to receive not just a scholarship letter, but a promise: you are not alone. You are not forgotten. You matter. Patricia presented each scholarship personally, shaking hands, listening to stories, crying unashamedly. This woman who'd been so controlled, so perfect, so afraid of vulnerability had cracked open. She was messy now. Human. Real. After the ceremony, Maryam found her grandmother standing in front of the memorial wall they'd installed. Photos of Elizabeth and Felix, their story told in pictures and words. No sanitizing. No prettying up. Just the truth. A woman who chose love. A man who died protecting his daughter. A grandmother who'd learned too late what mattered. She'd be proud of you, Patricia said softly. Of us, Maryam corrected. She wanted us to find each other, remember? Patricia pulled out a letter, old yellowed, the ink faded. I found this last week. Going through more boxes. She wrote it the day she left, but never sent it. Maryam took it with trembling hands. Her mother's handwriting, young and hopeful. Dear Mom, I know you think I'm making a mistake. Maybe I am. But Felix makes me feel like myself, the self I meant to be, not the one you designed. I love you. I always will. But I love myself more now. I hope someday you understand that leaving you was how I found me. I hope someday you can be happy I chose joy over obligation. I hope someday we can be family again, on new terms. Where you see me, not who you wanted me to be. I'm not lost, Mom. For the first time in my life, I'm found. Love, your brightest star. Maryam's hands shook. Her mother had been so young. So brave. So certain that love was worth the cost. She was found, Patricia whispered. I just couldn't see it. I was looking for my Elizabeth, the girl who'd do what I said. Not Harriet, the woman who'd made her own choices. Do you think? Maryam hesitated. Do you think she knew, at the end, that you still loved her? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I think she hoped. And maybe that was enough. They stood together, grandmother and granddaughter, looking at photos of the people they'd both loved and lost. The ballroom felt very far away, that night of accusation and revelation, the moment their worlds had collided in tears and truth. What now? Maryam asked. Patricia smiled, real and warm and nothing like the CEO smile that used to freeze boardrooms. Now we keep telling their story. We help more kids. We build something worthy of them. Together. Together. Maryam linked her arm through her grandmother's, and they walked out of the community center into the evening light. They weren't perfect. Their family was broken in ways that couldn't be fully repaired. But they were trying. And maybe, just maybe, that was what love looked like. Not the perfect, controlled version Patricia had once wanted, but the messy, complicated, real version Elizabeth had chosen. The necklace caught the light as Maryam moved, throwing sparkles across the pavement. My brightest star, the inscription read. Always. And finally, after 23 years of darkness, Elizabeth Harrington's light was shining again, not in the life she'd left behind, but in the lives she'd touched, the daughter she'd raised, and the foundation that would make sure no one else had to choose between love and survival. Her story wasn't a tragedy after all. It was a revolution. The end.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, do subscribe to our channel because your support keeps the team going, and stick with us because we have many more where this came from. More intriguing and more amazing stories as you can ever imagine. So do check it out and enjoy.